New Jersey, greater New York, New Jersey area. So this week, we're going to be talking about something on the side that, yes, it deals with building business and legacy together. Hey, fam. But we want to talk to y'all about some emotional things to look out for. I think these are some oftentimes not spoken of, and it's easy to start building together and then realize there's something that is not tangible that seems to keep coming up.
I think it's camouflaged.
Camouflaged
Feelings, camouflage emotions that often go off the radar. It's very stealthy, and so it's not always recognized.
Yeah, and so I think it's real easy to talk about, in order to build our businesses or build our legacies, we're going to need all these things that may come to mind. Oh, we need the website, I mean, the logos and the business card and the branding, and we need this and that, and all that is good and fine and stuff. But it's not those things. It's not those things that delay progress. It's not those things that delay a dream, that defer a dream. Bring the links.
Or stall progress.
Yeah, it's not those quote unquote or tangible things. It's more so the things that are working internally that will easily bring strife in the marriage, as well as because it's strife internally.
Yeah,
personally.
I think it frustrates us internally, and then we just spill out that frustration over into the marriage, and then that just makes the whole thing toxic.
Yeah, so we wanted to just bring some things to you all's attention. If you feel like especially if you feel like you all are moving in the right direction and you're clear about what the next step is and you're ready and maybe you're taking that step, kudos to you. But we want to just say, hey, look out for these things because they will always try to rear their little ugly heads. And we're going to break it down for you real quick. We won't be before you long, as they say in church, because dinner is being warmed up. And so the first one is perfectionism. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about perfectionism. And I'm kind of excited to talk about this because I feel like this has probably been the one thing that I probably have wrestled with the bulk of my life.
Really?
Yeah. Let me first say what perfectionism is. I mean, obviously the root word is inside of it, right? So it's the desire for everything to be perfect, but when you put the ism on it, because I think we all want, things that we're doing and working on to be perfect. When you put the ism on it, that speaks to the extremity of it. So when we are extreme in our pursuit for perfection, what happens is that we do that usually at the expense of everything else. So we strive for perfection at the expense of peace. We strive for perfection at the expense of healthy communication as we're building. We strive for perfection. And usually it's because we're running from something more than it is we're running to something. So perfectionism is trying to not go back to a place that scared us before, maybe in business. And so it's really more of a fear motivation than it is a pursuit of something. It's more like we're running from something than we're running to something.
That's so good, because I was listening to a podcast today with Dr. Anita. Is it?
Yeah.
Yes. Within the Light podcast. So good. And she was talking about, she was talking about perfectionism. And that's one of the things that she said is like, number one, the root of it, I think is important to know. It's fear. It's fear-based. Because, well, if this is not good enough, then what are people going to think? Am I going to still be accepted? Am I going to like it? And is it going to still work? Is it still going to be impactful? Like all these questions about something having to be a certain way. And then she mentioned that same thought process is you have to look at the motive of you building. And as you all are building your family, building your businesses, building your legacy, is the motive you running from where you were, what you don't want to go back to, or is the motive what you desire? So she mentioned like your desire to run to what you want has to be greater than running from what you don't want to go back to.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with typically because we haven't resolved something back there. If we've resolved something back there, then it's really not a factor for us anymore. But if we haven't resolved whatever that is back there in the rear, then it's like we've gone forward, but we've got some loose ends that haven't been tied up. And I'll just say this, for me, perfectionism was me judging how I was going to be judged before I presented it or put it out there.
Oh, wow.
So I was judging how
Not
I
you're
thought.
judging yourself, but other people.
I was judging how I thought I was going to be judged. And so whatever it is that I was working on or building, I was trying to avoid a judgment that I thought I would get. So it really had nothing to do with the thing that I was working on or building. It had more to do with how I felt it was going to be perceived. And I was trying to avoid that or pursue that. So if I wanted people to praise it, I was working on it so it could be praised. If I didn't want people to ridicule it, I kept tinkering on it and working on it because I didn't want people to ridicule it. So it really wasn't about the thing or whatever it is I was working on. It was about me trying to dodge people's perceptions one way or the other. Yeah,
that's so good. So Melvina Davis, she's saying she was in a conversation on this earlier today, and shame also prompts perfectionism too. Yeah, that's so true. Shame, because we're talking about like there's a root, there's a root to fear. There's a root to procrastination. For those of us who are like, oh, I have all these ideas and dreams. I'm like, okay, what are we doing with it today? You about to say something?
Well, I just want to add this. I remember when I was recording music, and many would say you're such a perfectionist. Now, I will tell you, there came a point where for me, it wasn't about how it was going to be judged, whether people liked the content or not, because I was confident about what I was saying. But because it was something that was going to be sort of etched in stone forever, burned into a CD forever, printed in a book forever, I did want it to be excellent, right?
That's different.
I wanted it to be perfect. So that wasn't perfectionism, but I also have spent a lot of time thinking, how are people going to think about this? Or how are they going to praise it? Or are they going to ridicule it? And I was like, I got to dodge, the ridicule and run towards the praise. So perfectionism just took over.
Yes. So that's one thing we wanted to bring up as you all are building as marriedpreneurs, whether you're indiepreneurs, spousalpreneurs, couplepreneurs. Just real quick recap if you don't know what those are. So spousalpreneurs is where one spouse is building the business while the other spouse is working the 9 to 5. And then we have the indiepreneurs where both spouses are building individual businesses. And then the couplepreneurs where you all are building the same business together. Now, you could be a combination of those as we are. It just depends on where you are and what season you're in. So, but let us know in the comments too, who's in here, who's in the room. So if you're indie, put I. That means individual businesses. If you're a spousal, put S. If you're couplepreneur, put C. So we know who's in here. We are both indiepreneurs and couplepreneurs.
That's right.
So, okay. So that's the first one. We want to make sure that you all are aware, because I say this because it's so easy to think that you are the only one when you feel these or you hear these thoughts in your inner mind, when you hear the thoughts of, well, it's just not good enough, I wanted to look this way before I press live. And that's okay.
These are the things that we rehearse to ourselves.
And then as a result, you procrastinate. Now, here's I think a great litmus test to know if you likely are battling with perfectionism. And that is, do you have a record of starting or talking about starting? And maybe you start, but you don't continue and you don't finish it.
Or maybe you go as far enough as you can so nobody would have to judge it.
Ooh.
So maybe you spend a lot of time learning, but you never build and present it.
Researching.
That's another good one.
That's a good one, right? Researching. So if there's a cycle of that in your own life, that's ultimately going to impact your legacy that you're building in your business, in marriage, as you all are growing. So it's something to be aware of, number one, and to look out for these red flags. That's what we're talking about today. So it's not so technical today on the business side. We'll definitely circle around back to that next week. But it really is understanding what happens when you all are building a business and the mental things that go on to try to delay or stop you totally from moving forward. And like I said before, it's not always just between the two of you. It starts individually. So that perfectionism, it starts individually, and that's an internal war, and that impacts what you all are building, right?
Yeah.
I know. We got to go to the next one, husband.
Let's just go to the next one.
What you want to say?
I just want to say,
feel it bubbling up inside of him. You know, like when you could feel somebody next to you and they just like, they're trying to hold it in their head.
I've done this. And so I just want to say there's a temptation to say it's not perfectionism, it's a standard of excellence. Wow. And I just want to say, don't confuse having a standard of excellence.
Talk about that though.
For perfectionism.
So what's the difference? So for the people in the back who asking that question, I think that's
for the people in the back,
that's a great
the difference
point.
between a standard of excellence and perfectionism is that a standard of excellence is derived from a personal value about what you're doing or the substance of what you're doing, the content of what you're doing. It really has nothing to do with the public or not even necessarily your own customer base or your client base, though it involves them. But in other words, the things that we do, that we create it, and we have a standard of excellence for it because it's to say, if I'm going to put this out,
I want to feel good about it.
I want to feel good about it, right? And so that tells me I have given and done my very best. That's a standard of excellence.
Doing and giving your best.
Doing it and giving your best. And that actually, once that has been hit, because that's a standard, it's a measure. So once that measure has been hit, you're good.
Mm-hmm. Perfectionism, though, is that thing that it goes beyond that.
It goes beyond that.
And it's no longer about only you feeling
It's not about the substance. It's not about your values. It's about what are they going to think?
It's about what are the people going to say.
It's all about
what are they going to say? Is it going to be good enough for them?
It's building with your critics in mind, not building with your customers in mind.
Is it going to be good enough for them?
Yep.
Those are some good questions to ask yourself. Like what question?
This is very introspective.
Right. Yeah. And what questions am I asking myself about me and my perfectionism issues or ways to know the difference between the two? It's real. Okay, let's move on because dinner is coming. Okay. Second thing you want to look out for as you're building your legacy. This is what we're talking about today. As you're building your legacy together, we're going over 3 toxic mindsets, emotions, I guess we would say, areas to avoid and make sure you stay far away from. But we're going in on them head on so we can really identify them, because it's easy to be like, oh no, I don't deal with that. Oh, that's not me. Oh, that's not me. But let's just really talk about the signs and the symptoms so we can really take a very clear assessment to know, is this us and do I need to handle this? Okay, so the first one we talked about was perfectionism. The second one, self-sabotage.
I know this one too.
Go ahead, jump in.
All you got to do to understand, to define it, is just flip the 2 words. It's sabotaging yourself. Yeah. Self-sabotage is when we sabotage ourselves. Now, what is a sabotage? A sabotage, anytime somebody sabotages anything, it's because they don't want it to be successful. They don't want it to win. They don't want it to realize or to happen or to come to fruition. So they will act like they want it to happen, act like they want it to come to fruition.
They say it.
Act like they want it to be successful. So they'll have all the outward expressions of wanting this thing to happen. They'll work on it. They'll study for it. They'll build it. They'll train for it. They'll take classes. They'll get coached. They'll do, you fill in the blank. They'll even buy all the materials. They'll even start the building process. But then there'll be one linchpin, one integral piece of the thing that can really move the needle on it. And they'll pull the plug on that. They won't proceed forward with that. And so the reason why we self-sabotage, and I've done this before, is because I didn't want to deal with the pressure of having it happen, because when it happens, what comes with that is another level of responsibility,
and
expectation and accountability. So if I don't want the accountability of being in the lead, of being in leadership, if I don't want the accountability of having to really serve at that level, I'll act like I want to serve at that level because I'm romantic about what I'm building. I'm very romantic about what I'm building, but I really don't want it to be realized.
Yeah, that's so good. Let me say something too. I see a comment here. She says that makes sense. Sabotaging tasks, etc., out of fear of failure. Let me come from the other end. I've seen this as well. Whether like even in my own self, making sure like, hey, we can't be moved by fear of anything, right? But fear of failure is definitely a prominent one. But let's also move it on the other end of the spectrum, which is fear of success. Like, what happens if this really works?
Which is what I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. What happens if this really works? And so sometimes I feel like the thought process of the realization of something becoming that you've wanted for so long, or that you've envisioned for so long, and then that door is right there and the door is open, and instead of going through it, you walk past it, or you burn it down, or you box it up so you can't walk through it anymore. And oftentimes we do things like this, and every single day it's so important to look at. I think this is going to be very easy litmus to see if you're dealing with self-sabotage from the fear of failure or the fear of success. It matters not. It's based in fear, rooted in fear. We don't want to have nothing to do that's rooted in fear. Okay? We don't want to have anything to do with anything that's rooted in fear, because that's going to be the motive of the fruit. That's going to be the fruit that comes from that. Now, every single day, here's a quick litmus. Every single day when you have your goals for the day concerning, let's just say, your business, and you want to be asking yourselves, are you doing the work that needs to get done to reach that daily goal, or that weekly goal, or that monthly goal? Or do you find yourself doing all of the quote unquote busy work primarily? Not that the busy work doesn't need to get done, but it's so easy to put other like busy tasks in front of the real work that actually is going to move the needle forward, which means it's going to put you in likely a uncomfortable situation, because that's where you're growing. That's what you're like, actually doing the thing. If that's picking up the phone, or if that's sending off the emails, or if that's making new connections, that's going into the DMs, or like whatever that is, what is stopping you from moving forward? What are you allowing to be put in the place of the thing that really needs to get done on a daily basis? And so it's easy to see. Like, we don't have to see what's on your schedule. We don't have to see what's on your calendar. You can look at it and look at the fruit of it. So this is Tuesday, right? Look at what the fruit of last week looked like. If that was how it normally goes, did you reach those goals? And if not, then what are those things that have been getting in the way of that, right? And oftentimes, if we really look at that, you ask yourself in the moment, like, why am I not wanting to do this? Or why am I putting bricks up in the middle of the doorway that's wide open? That's an opportunity that literally God has opened for me, but we're not walking through it. But instead we say we want to, but then we brick it up. What do you call it? You board it up, brick it up. Mm-hmm. So you can't walk through it. And so you're cutting off, what would you say, like your own opportunity, or the thing that you've been praying for.
You're your own hindrance. You're trying to stop it from actually happening. And so when you stand in that position to stop it from actually happening, it's because you don't want to bear, or you feel like you can't bear the responsibility that comes with being in that position. A lot of times people won't want to, I've seen this even when I was working in banking. There were certain people who didn't want to get promoted. Like, man, the goals are going to be higher, and the thus and such. And then I got to be more responsible, and so on and so forth. And this is the same reason why people stay in positions of comfort that they know well, even if those things are stagnating their potential, they'll sort of hang out there, build a house there, rather than move on and go into, what is unknown and maybe even uncertain, which, by the way, just only speaks to the fact that you think that it's your responsibility to keep you there, and you think there's no grace there. If you really knew that there was grace where you wanted to go, grace in launching, grace in building, mercy out there, you would go out there saying, you know what, I've got insurance. For this. But when you don't think that there's going to be any mercy, no forgiveness out there if you make a mistake, then you'll not do those things. Even if you say you want to do those things, you'll not do those things because It's better to handle what you can predict than to go forward with what you may not be able to predict at that time. So
that's a mouthful, right? That's a heartful, not even a mouthful right there. Getting out of that comfort zone. That's the other litmus I would look at too, is to see like, what are you doing every day, every week that's pulling you out of your own comfort zone, in the sense of it's taking you into your growth zone. So what we've discovered is if we allow ourselves to remain comfortable for too long, we will not grow. There is no growth there. So that's an easy way to see, are we actually moving forward? Are we allowing ourselves to even like self-sabotage ourselves by being comfortable? By staying comfortable, are we allowing ourselves to do the same thing day in and day out without any true growth, without feeling those butterflies, without feeling like, wow, I don't know what's next type of feeling? That's an opportunity to grow. So be mindful. Self-sabotage doesn't always look like burning a house down that you're supposed to be living in, but it could look like not actually doing the work to grow forward. So that's the second thing. Lastly, area that we want you to be mindful of when we're talking about building as marriedpreneurs, making sure that you are aware of these areas so you're not allowing yourselves to be stumped by it. And that is misaligned expectations. So that also goes along with wrong thinking, and misaligned expectations could look like, well, I think it's going to take us 3 months to get to said goal, but you realize 3 months come and go and you are nowhere near that goal. Why? It's because you just didn't have right expectations. Oftentimes you don't realize what it takes to really move forward, because in this day of social media age, we can look at someone's timeline and it just looks like, oh, they just got up on Monday and they accomplished this by Friday, not realizing that they've been working behind the scenes for the last 2 years on this thing. And so by the time we actually see it, the fruit sticking up from it, we think, oh, when we start on Monday, then by Friday, we're going to see the same thing. But we just don't know the strategy and the work that's been going on to bring about this fruit for the last couple of years, right? So I think it's really important when we talk about misaligned expectations, to align expectations. And oftentimes when we're starting and we're getting out of our comfort zone, we may not have that blueprint or the map of what we're called to do, because it looks totally different, right? For every couple, the legacy, the calling, it looks different because we are different from everybody else. So we're actually like building this thing out as we're doing it, right? And then I'm gonna finish this sentence real quick. Okay. And then because we're building it out as we're doing it, what happens is we do find that we have misaligned expectations while we're building, but the key is to quickly align them, to say, oh, you know what? I didn't even realize it. So let me switch my thinking, versus leaving ourselves there with a misaligned expectation. Well, how come this didn't happen right now for me? How come I did all this? Well, what else do I need? Like, not realizing there are all these other layers that have to happen internally for us to see that fruit externally. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's generally three areas as marriedpreneurs where we have misaligned expectations. Mm-hmm. One is it, and you just mentioned it. One is in regards to time.
Yeah.
We either think we have more time than we have, or we think we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
And so we want to align our expectations by being honest about the amount of time that we have. So if you think you've got, if you think you can get it done in 3 months, but because of your family dynamics during the season, you really may need 6 months, but you put yourself on this 3-month expectation. And so when it doesn't happen, you get all disappointed, because disappointment is just an unmet expectation. So when we haven't had our expectations met, we get disappointed. So we have to align our expectations. And when we get disappointed, people get thrown off and so forth. But the second way is that with our talent, we think we need to do everything or have to do everything. And sometimes, well, no, that's not the case. We don't need to do everything. We can't actually always do everything. And the more sophisticated what it is that you're building, the more talent it is that you're going to need. So you do have talent. We all have talent to a degree, to an extent, in a certain area. So then we want to be very honest about what's our real talent, what's our skill set. So we have to align those expectations and say, you know what, I'm good, or you're good, or we're good in these particular areas up to this point, but I recognize where my talent ends, and I know, you know what, if I'm going to take it beyond this, I'm going to have to get some help,
right?
Or somebody with a different talent in a different area to come along and complement my talent. And then finally, with resources, the resources, and I'll say this, the resources that we had early on in the Marriedpreneur life are different than the resources that we have now.
Yeah.
But if we had the expectations we have now with the resources when we first started, then that would have been a real setup for disappointment. And it did happen a few times. I'm not going to say it didn't happen.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of that. And we had to be very honest and say, you know what? Look, here's what we're working with. Yeah. And as you grow, generally speaking, so do your resources. So misaligned expectations are generally around those three areas as you two are building. And it has an emotional effect on us. We say, you know, it's all business, it's not personal, but business is actually very personal.
It is. Oh, that was a period?
Yeah, that was a period.
It sounded like personal.
Actually, it was a ...
Yes. Okay, so let's land this plane so we can go eat. Can you tell your girl is hungry? And so my mama's in town and she's warming up dinner for us. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to dinner. Okay, so we were talking about this evening the toxic mindsets. Absolutely, you want to avoid that. Often go unnoticed, but the fruit of these toxic mindsets actually stop us. And sometimes you're like, well, what is this? What is this start-stop cycle? Why? What is the root of this? And check these out. If this is you, or if you're feeling like maybe I'm having issues in these areas, let me check on this and let me fix it. The first one is perfectionism. We went over that. The second one to look out for is self-sabotage. And finally is misaligned expectations. And giving, I would say, for really an antidote for that misaligned expectations, especially that one, is giving yourself grace, giving grace to yourself and grace to each other, because you're building out like your own SOPs to your legacy while you're building it. So it's not like you have this book that you can read and somebody else says, oh, do this first, do this next, do this third, and this is going to take about this much time. For some areas, some things, yes, but because you're so unique and your calling is so unique, you have to actually do it, and that's how you learn to do it. And so you build out your SOPs while you're doing that. So give yourself grace, give each other grace as you're building, and just be mindful, be very mindful of these areas, because they will do their best to rise up from places that you thought were long gone. When you're under pressure and when you're uncomfortable and when you're faced with an opportunity or a decision to move forward or not to move forward, just be mindful of these three areas right here. Anything else? I
think that's it.
Yes. And something that we did this week or last week, the latest episode of the Marriedpreneur Life podcast, episode 213, we introduced the Marriedpreneur operating systems. And as you all, if you don't have any systems in place, it's a great place to start. Taken years to actually put all these things together. Didn't even know we were building it out, but here we are. You know, it is easy to read a checklist, which is what we have for you in the link in the bio or marriedpreneurlife.com. You can get the download, the Marriedpreneur operating systems download, which is a checklist, but it's easy to read it, easy to download it, easy to say we're going to do it. But when you start, like when the rubber meets the road, you're going to find yourselves in uncomfortable situations, because that's where growth always meets us, in uncomfortable situations. So just be ready for that. Be on the lookout for these areas. We want to make sure that you all are prepared and equipped and ready to move forward beyond this. So that's what's necessary. So we want to encourage you to grab that download. I want to also encourage you, if this has been helpful for us, let us know. Hit us up in the DMs as well, too. If you all are building a business and you're needing some insights and strategy on your next steps and what that looks like, let us know. We are here to serve, and it is our honor to do so. So until next time.
Keep living purposefully.
Can you say it again?
Keep living purposefully.
Wait, let me start over. Until next time.
Keep living purposefully.
Powerfully.
And profitably.
In sync. All right, y'all. Have a good one. God bless.